No. All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo Rice, and my correspondent,
Simone Cherie.
And Kyle Andrew.
All right. So we are back on another lovely Friday, and I don't know what the weather's doing. I'm looking out the window. I can't tell. I saw the sun a few minutes ago, but I no longer see the sun, so don't really know what that's about, but it's all good in the hood. So let's get right into it. Simone, what do we have on the rundown?
So there's been a lot of big stories this week. This was RNC week, the Republican National Convention. So we'll definitely talk about that, talk about 2020, where Biden versus Trump are in the polls right now, and what we can kind of expect, maybe touch on voting a little bit and the vote by mail controversy that we've been following. And then we can talk about, unfortunately, a major incident this week in Wisconsin and the protests that continue to go on in Wisconsin. I think that should all be a topic that we get to cover as well. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of light news, but we should also give everybody a COVID update. There's been some updates here in Georgia in terms of where we stand and where the hotspots are and how that's going to affect back to school and a bunch of other things.
All right, well, y'all can start with y'all little bright spot.
All I wanted to ask was if we could just start with something light, because this has been a very heavy, very dark week in 2020, aka Jumanji year. And I know it's August 28th, and so that means
I like that. That's the first time I heard that.
Brought us back our pumpkin spice lattes. Now, the reason why this is a big deal to me is because I don't know what they've done, but they've cornered the pumpkin spice market. Like, I love pumpkin spice season. It's my favorite coffee drink to drink. And for some reason, from January 1st to today, you cannot find legitimate pumpkin spice coffee. You can't. There's 1,000,001 videos and recipes and hacks and whatever, and they're all hacks. They're all crap. You cannot replace the pumpkin spice. It sucks. I tried. I spent money on all kinds of little do-it-at-home stuff. I have an espresso machine at home. I could never figure it out. So I'm excited. I've bulked up and bought some K-Pods, some Starbucks K-Pods with pumpkin spice. Got about 50 of those because I'm not going to let this happen to me again in 2021. It's going to be a better year than this year. But yeah, Pumpkin Spice Day. Happy Pumpkin Spice Day.
I'm trying to understand, and every time I talk about marketing and very good marketing, I get into Starbucks. The fact that they have brainwashed y'all pinheads into believing that you need coffee when it's 100 degrees outside. It's brilliant marketing. Brilliant marketing.
I don't drink coffee because I'm cold. I drink coffee so that I'm energized and I'm not cranky. It keeps me awake. It keeps me going. And it actually makes me a nicer person. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, there was actually very few Capricorns who would function without coffee. Very few. They really legitimately need it. Virgos too.
Yeah.
But the pumpkin spice flavor, first of all, Starbucks sells you an experience, not just the coffee. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing is this particular drink. Pumpkin spice, like you said, had been around for forever. Starbucks didn't invent it, but they have a corner on this market. And I would love to know, especially from the business perspective, we got to get into this one day, how they do it, because I swear you can go online, you can go to any store you want to, you will not find it. It's like they've got something in cahoots with every major coffee retailer, and they literally make sure you cannot get your hands on it. I don't know how they do it. I don't know.
Y'all sound like two caffeine heads, and I substituted caffeine for the word I really want to use. Y'all sound like two caffeine heads.
If I could inject it, I might. I'm not gonna say I would, but I might.
So now you officially sound like a crack or a meth head. That's really wow.
I want very little. I ask very little of life. This is something I very, very much need.
Y'all are so ridiculous right now. I will say this, that Cafe Intermezzo has a pumpkin steamer that I have loved half of my life. I don't know if it goes in and out of season like Starbucks, but I guess I should find out because I really love it. And the last time I was there, they didn't have it, and it really made me feel some kind of way. But I will give y'all that much. I had a pumpkin something from Starbucks one time. I paid way too much for it, and it gave me way less excitement than my pumpkin steamer does at a Cafe Intermezzo. I just want to make that point.
Everybody's got their thing that they just chase. It's like a flavor that once you get it in your system, you just can't get it out. My wife has the same thing with ginger. She's like a ginger junkie, and there's a specific brand of ginger beer she just has to buy every time she's in like Jersey or a place that she can find it. Once you get that, it's like, it really is like chasing a dragon. It's like, I get so close. I see it on eBay. I spend the money for it. I wait for it. I get the email. Sorry, could not deliver. It's like, it's literally been like me chasing my tail for a year. So this is actually a great day. Regardless of everything else we're going to cover today, it's still a great day.
Oh my God, y'all are so crazy. Chasing a dragon.
That's
really?
What it feels like. It's like this. I get so close to finding it, and I can never get it.
Oh my God. All right. Moving. I'm trying to think, do I have any other bright news before we really get into this stuff? Bright news. No, I don't. Unfortunately.
That's so sad.
Oh, yes, I do. Okay, I do. All right. So Kyle has become a lifesaver because on Monday, Kyle will be joining the television team to help me out for one of my camera guys being out. So we're going to really find out if that degree from Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
It's not a degree. It's a certificate of completion.
He got it.
Okay, it's the same. We're going to see the certificate, how much he learned from this certificate on Monday. So that's good news. Kyle saved my life.
Yeah.
Not a DJ, but Kyle. Kyle saved my life. So I appreciate it. Unfortunately, what he doesn't realize is when he told me he's usually off on Monday, I'll keep that little nugget in the back of my head.
Usually.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know to keep in the back of my head. All right, I'm outside of that. That's all the good news I can muster up, which is disgusting. It's considered that. That's the only good news I could come up with.
But you mentioned the weather, Ricardo, and that kind of made me think about what's going on. So, like, I think in Atlanta here, we're getting some of the residual stuff from the Midwest. But what's going on with like Hurricane Laura and Marco? There's like two back-to-back. No. I mean, we're not getting any of that so much because it was more toward the Gulf Coast, but it made landfall, I think, Wednesday this week, and then just kept sweeping. Yeah. And now it spent most of its time in New Orleans, but did touch like the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, Gulf Coast of Texas, stuff like that, Gulf of Mexico. And then it's continuing to make its way. So I don't know if that was some of what we were getting earlier this week, but you know, I think it's just kind of gray and weird and hot, and I think it's just going to be this way for a while here.
I mean, one has to really wonder, like, and I hate to say this, but you really have to look at the world and really be like, because I think I'm 40. So, you know, we've had a lot of near misses, and people talk about Revelation and the stuff that goes on in Revelation, and we've had a lot of near misses in past years. But I declare, when you look at the world now, you're just like, you know what, maybe Revelation was real. Like, so, you know, people go, oh, well, Revelation is just symbolic. It's not really meant to be taken literally like a checklist. I beg to differ right about now, because everything that's kind of written in Revelation, you're literally seeing. I'm just like, wow, should I be concerned? Like, one has to wonder if you should really be concerned with all the stuff that's going on. But I digress. Let's
yes.
We tried doing unicorns and rainbows, and that's as far as we got. So
yeah,
let's go ahead and chase the dragon.
Okay, so starting with, we'll talk about the RNC Convention. So what's kind of funny about this whole thing, especially because it's covered in COVID, this was supposed to take place, remember, I think in North Carolina. If you don't remember, like the original location was supposed to be in North Carolina, but Trump refused to like abide by the health measures and wanted to have a big gathering and wanted to have like no masks and that sort of crowd control. So they pulled it from there. And it was supposed to be in Jacksonville, Florida. And then I think Trump announced that it wouldn't be there. That was in July. So I think they really had to kind of to change plans and course correct quite a few times. My understanding, out of all these nights, I didn't watch the entire convention, but I watched some of the speeches I really wanted to be there for, like Nikki Haley's and my friend Jerron Smith's speech. There was, you know, under the original plan, there was supposed to be about 2,500 delegates. There was only 300. So, I mean, again, not a normal convention, not the normal presidential election year conventions that we're used to seeing that are very, very hyped. But also, every time, ever since Trump's inauguration, I think there's always going to be a spotlight on how big the crowds are. I just think that's always going to be the case because it always dominates like any coverage that you see of the stuff that Trump speaks at or any of his rallies is like how many people were actually there. And considering what they had planned and how many people showed up, I think it goes to show that it's not just Democratic voters that are concerned about crowds. And it's not just Democratic voters that, don't want to be in a huge convention full of people who aren't wearing masks. I mean, I think that Scott Walker had some decent words to say. Again, it's President Trump, I think, spoke a lot about themes that we usually associate with him, but he was, I think, really trying to color Joe Biden. He talked about anarchy. He talked about authoritarianism. He talked about essentially keeping America great. And Pence, I think, had something along those lines to say as well. Tim Scott, who's the only Black Republican on the federal level anymore from South Carolina, also spoke. And I appreciated what he had to say for the most part. It's more so that the entire convention probably had about 1 day's worth of meat, and then the rest of it is just convention. What you didn't see as much was like what you saw on the Democratic side, where there were so many local officials and kind of like this hodgepodge of different leaders from here and from there and from here and from there. Everyone that you saw was essentially already an elected official at the U.S. level, or formally at the U.S. level, and then a couple of folks who really hammered down their points. So Abby Johnson, who's like a pro-life author, and she's anti-Planned Parenthood, she spoke, and obviously we know about the heartbeat bill and Trump's stance on abortion and on right to life. So everything that you saw was, I think, what you'd probably expect. But this may have actually been a little bit tamer than some of his rallies have been, and I think maybe to a certain extent I could appreciate that. What were kind of your takeaways?
Kyle.
Okay, I didn't watch it, but I did see different clips and things of that sort. One speech that I did watch closer in its entirety was Alice Johnson, that's the lady who was granted clemency by President Trump and Kim Kardashian. Of course, she served as his token to get the Black vote. I don't necessarily think that is going to make Black people vote for him. Like, I appreciate what he did for her. However, there are bigger issues. You know what I mean? I didn't, like I said, I didn't watch it, but like there were memes all over social media last night about Melania's bright green dress and people putting it on.
There's a meme now of her dress.
Yeah, and she gave a fake smile to somebody. I don't know who that lady was, but she was not feeling it.
Yep. That's true.
Okay, so apparently Trump said that, I guess he alluded to what would happen if Biden becomes president. And he said he warned that the country would be violent anarchists, agitators, and criminals if Joe Biden were to win in November. He also tooted his administration's response to coronavirus, saying it is centered on the science, the facts, and data. Even as we see these numbers rising, like I told y'all, I didn't watch it because I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. And the mere fact that a sitting president can sit up at the podium and continuously just lie, and those lies roll off their tongue like honey, is concerning to me. But at this point, what else do we really expect? The memes, the memes that I saw about Tim were just the internet has no chill. It really has no chill, and when they go in, they go in. I understood what the DNC, the picture they were trying to paint. I guess I just don't understand the picture that the RNC was trying to paint. Once again, it feels like, or it seems like Trump is a demigod. And again, this is his multiverse. So it looks like this hodgepodge of just people that he strategically placed to tell some, and when I say story, I really do mean story as in lies or propaganda, to kind of coerce people into believing that America has been this great for the last 4 years. When we're looking at constant rioting, we're looking at constant rises in COVID numbers, we're looking at constant rises in unemployment. I don't know. I feel like he has his base living in some fictitious land of what America could be. Well, half the stuff you promised, you hadn't even delivered on. I'm not a fan of the wall, but where's the wall? Like, that was your diehard go-to issue when you were campaigning. Well, I'm going to build this wall, and I'm going to make sure, blah, 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 blah. The only thing you managed to do is put kids in cages. And, at this point, we know what the status is on that. The ladies brought a little insight. Emily and Amna brought a little insight into it. But the only thing you really promised was the wall, and you didn't even deliver on that. So I'm just trying to understand, where he fit And what is his base? Where is his base located? Like, are y'all on Mars? Like, what are y'all physically looking at?
Physically, I mean, they're mostly in the middle of the country, like the Rust Belt. Like, so that's still the case. That was the case when he was elected, and it's the case now. And that's the area that cost Hillary the election for sure. But so before you get into that segue, because like the narrative, the American narrative, well, Trump's narrative, I think is kind of like a really good point, as we'll talk about Wisconsin in a second. But just while we're still on the election right now, Real Clear Politics says that Biden is leading Trump over 7.1 percentage points in average national polls. So that's down like a 0.5 percentage from last week, but he's still technically a pretty big gap. He's higher in all of these swing states as of right now. The percentage of voters who disapprove of how Trump has done is higher in all of the swing states, like so the most crucial states, which I think is pretty important, including all of the states, including 2 of the states that Trump won in 2016. There's also another GOP pollster, Frank Letts. I don't know if you know his name, but he's probably one of the most sought after Republican pollsters talking about political strategy. He gave a dissection of this as well and said that, Trump there was times where he went too far, as he always does, but generally speaking, that like one example he gave is that Trump has said this a few times. He's the best president for African Americans since Lincoln. He said that several times.
Please don't get me started on that. Please don't get me started.
Which even he, obviously as a Republican strategist, was just kind of like, God, this is just, it disappointed him as well. But he said that this is essentially Biden's election, and it's Biden's election to lose, which I think is a really poignant way to put it. That it's Biden's to lose based on the numbers, based on where we are as a country, and based on how many people are unhappy, even former Republicans or Republican voters in 2016 that did vote for Trump. There's a marginal percent that are unhappy. I think you remember there's like a 2% that's what made the difference. And that's where we are in terms of Republican voters who believe that who are disappointed and would not vote for Trump again. So it is Biden's to lose. I do think what's exciting, at least for fall, is that we're probably going to have record viewership of these presidential debates, don't you think? Like with Biden on the stage.
Yeah.
These are going to be some of the like highest watched debates I think we've had.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to say, I'm just looking for, it's going to be very entertaining to me. For me, it's going to be informal, but it's also going to be one of the most entertaining presidential debates I feel like that's ever happened.
I mean, I don't know if people are necessarily waiting for the president debate. I think everybody is excited about the vice president debate, because if Kamala can't do nothing else, she can throw some punches in the debate. So, I mean, for me, but I also think that's my fear. Like, if Kamala gets out there and swings and knocks out Pence, like we probably know she's going to, what is that going to look like when Biden goes up against Trump? Like, and I hate to say this, I almost feel like it's David versus Goliath. I'm not even going to say who Goliath is. But I just, and I'm not talking about debating facts, because I've said this when they were all running. We're not talking about debating facts on that thing. We're talking about a full-on performance, and I still can't say that Biden can give a performance. People don't expect Trump to debate facts. They just don't. People are looking for a show. And I can't believe I'm saying that about the presidency, but people are looking for a show, and I don't know if Biden can give a show. Like I said, so we're really banking on Kamala to really present facts and knock Pence out. And as ridiculous as that sounds, that's kind of the dichotomy that I think people are really, the place that people are sitting in. We're not looking at a fact fight with the presidential debate between Biden and Trump. We're looking for a show. We're looking for a fact fight between Pence and Kamala, because we know that Kamala's that chick. So I'm interested in, and I don't normally watch those things, but I actually might watch these, because
I think this is the best part. But another point about that too is that, like, if I was Joe Biden, and I'm sure his campaign team is doing something similar, but I would be spending the next, several weeks doing nothing but debate. For what? You can't have a rally, right? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So if you're going to do any if you're going to do any activity as a candidate, you've already got the nomination. It's just between you and the other party. I'm spending this entire time just debating. I may be hiring Dave Chappelle on a contract, on a retainer, to help me with stage presence, to help me with improv. That's what I would be spending all of my time doing. And I think it would be more than worthwhile, but I'm going to hire somebody who can help me to be more than a politician because I'm not going to be speaking to people I want to convince. I'm going to be literally going one-on-one with another person. That's what I'd be spending my time doing.
I can't believe that we're sitting in this place at this point in history that we expect a show from presidential debate and we expect fact fighting between the VPs. I don't think anybody's ever paid that much attention, this much attention to VPs, because when Biden was VP, I couldn't tell you what Biden did the whole time. You know, he kissed a couple of babies, shook some hands. I couldn't tell you what he did for those 8 years that he was VP. All we knew was that when Obama had to make major appearances, you know, Biden was there with the wife. That's kind of all we expected. So to put this much weight on the VP position is very interesting to me. Like I feel like by the end of these debates, we're gonna feel like Kamala is the actual president and Biden's the VP. I feel like that's what's ultimately how that's gonna play out. So I don't know. I really don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we should. Do you want to transition then to the Jacob Blake story, because I think a piece of this. Because the piece of this is kind of about the narrative. When we talk about Kyle Rittenhouse, we can talk about that. So Jacob Blake, who we were just mentioning earlier, was a 29-year-old black man shot by police, in broad daylight on Sunday in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is another viral video. This is 40 miles south of Milwaukee. But there was cell phone video, of course, which has been the great aid in all of these police-involved shootings. A witness showed that 3 officers were following him around his SUV. He attempted to get inside. He opened the door. And then one in particular is shown shooting him multiple times in the back. I think he was shot a total of 7 times altogether. His 3 young children were right there, so they all saw everything up close. The Wisconsin Department of Justice, led the probe into the whole incident. Charges have been filed. They've led a probe into the whole incident, and on Friday, they said that they cannot comment on whether or not they knew that there would be a knife, but if they did, they would see if charges would be filed. So they've almost made like an open promise that as a result of this investigation, they will either go further or not go further, and it's all supposed to be hinging on that, if I understand that correctly. As more details are emerging, there's a lot of old comments and statements and problematic behavior that's coming out about Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul. He's kind of refusing to answer questions. He has not really necessarily been on top of this the way that we've seen other governors recently when this has happened, or even like, for example, Mayor Lance Bottoms, when we had incidents here with our protests. He's just said, they're not going to comment on the incident. The suspicion of whether or not he had a knife in his possession, I think, is really interesting, because that became the conversation for several days this week. And I think it was CNN who kind of at least published or posed the question, since when do we justify all of those bullets for a knife? Like, we're not talking about a gun, which I think is the normal suspicion of officers, or at least it's what they claim that they were afraid of when we're talking about whether or not they opened fire. In this case, we're talking about a knife, which just feels like, it may be true, but also just feels like how would that be reasonable force, if at all? So the last piece of information I've got was that the Kenosha Police Department were dispatched to the residence initially. So it was not like spontaneous. They weren't initially meant to engage him. Officer Shesky is the name of the officer who wanted to stop him. He deployed a stun gun, and they said it was unsuccessful, and so that's what happened. But I don't know if any of you have seen the video, but it's kind of like, you get to a point watching these things where it's almost like what's going to happen. Your mind just starts to fill in the blanks. You just see it coming. In a spur of the moment situation, that's not true. Like, that's not how it goes. When you're in the situation, it feels, there's not enough time to think about it, but it's just almost like, man, I could just see it coming. And then it was just a question as I was watching it, and as that door opened, like, okay, how bad is this going to get? But thoughts, reactions, opinions.
I saw it initially on Twitter. And like, he was coming around the car. He got in his car in the driver's seat, and like, I think it was like 3 shots that were recorded. Honestly, like you said, I knew it was coming, and I'm upset with myself because I'm kind of becoming desensitized to it, because it happens so much. It's like every other month, every year. But his sister, in a press release, his sister's 30 years old. She actually is a African American history major or minor or something like that. She was just basically saying, she's like, I don't want your pity. I'm not sad. I'm just tired, you know, and I don't want, you know, you to feel bad for me. I want change. The rioting, the looting that took place after the death of George Floyd on May 25th, I thought that was going to be, and we were going to see some changes then, but we're obviously still in the same place. And I don't really know what needs to be done or said or what more actions need to be taken, because they're still looting in Wisconsin, still looting Target. I don't know why, but that's what they're doing.
The lamp. It's lamp
Yeah.
Target. I promise it's a lamp.
Especially now, I mean, this is not helpful.
So here's the thing, and Double R's not here, but he called me yesterday. You know, he gets very heated when it comes to this kind of stuff. So he called me yesterday, and I think, and I for lack of a better word, I'm gonna say beauty. The beauty of the situation is it's bringing other issues in the Black community to light. So, and I've said this before, and I will continuously say this, until we recognize that the issue is a lack of legislation, and that it's lovely that we protest, it's great that we show up to a White House, all that's beautiful, that's lovely. The issue is a lack of legislation. Now, Georgia, being the beautiful state it is, I think set stuff in motion, much like we've continuously done for the last couple of months. I would say the last year, we set stuff in motion. What did we set in motion? Well, so Atlanta, we are the poster child for riots and protesting initially out the gate in the last couple of months. In that time, we watched Mayor Bottoms be kind of disconnected from the people that were doing the protesting and the byproduct of the looting. We kind of watched her be a little bit disconnected. We get past that, we keep moving. So they start passing legislation. Next thing you know, we get this little slick bill that gets passed. Since they clearly can't stop the protesting, they get smart. So the other side recognized the power of legislation. So what do? They passed that bill, HB 8 something, I think 838, the one that talks about who they sue. So they passed the bill that says, so what they say is basically behind the scenes, okay, we can't stop you from protesting, and we don't want to unravel the immunity of police because that's just too convoluted. We don't really want to get into that. So what we're going to do is we're going to let you keep protesting, but we're going to get y'all on the back end. So they passed that law, HB 838, that says pretty much, hey, if an officer is wounded or hurt while he's trying to do his job, and I'm paraphrasing, while he's trying to do his job, not only can he sue the person that he was trying to take down, he can sue the people that are in charge of the riot, he can sue the rioters, whoever. He can pretty much sue everybody and get whatever he needs from them, pretty much in civil court. That's what they did on the back end. So what did they do? Basically, what they did was they say, we understand the power of legislation. You guys don't. So we're not going to give you what you need on legislation. We'll appease you and do little things. Say we're passing bills, doing all these things, never really doing anything. We're going to appease you and do this. Meanwhile, we understand the power of legislation, so we're going to pass this stuff on the back end. Now you set things in motion. And I can't get us to understand the fact of it's about legislation. Being in the streets is great, but we really need to start coming down on these senators and all these people that are supposed to be representing us and passing legislation. That's the issue. And I keep saying, in the old days, they understood it was a two-pronged fight. It's great that we got boots on the ground. We need that. But on the back end, we need to be have people in these back offices having these conversations about what we really need to do about legislation. Until we do, we're going to keep getting slapped in the faces. Because the reality is, the stuff that we're seeing is not new. It's just now being recorded, and we see it so fast because of social media. This stuff, you really can see a hashtag every day. This stuff happens literally every day. It's a matter of who's in the position to record it and upload it and how fast they do it. I'm personally over it. I don't want to see another hashtag. When I saw this stuff come up, I didn't even read it. I didn't want to see it. Because, again, we can literally see this stuff every day. There are 50 states. We can literally see this stuff every day, depending on who has a camera, who's present, and how savvy they are on social media. That's not going to get us any change. Protesting is great. But until we get people in the back offices having these conversations with the people that are supposed to be representing us, that sit in these chambers on a day-to-day basis and read this legislation and pass this legislation and pick apart what comes across their desk, what are we really doing? On the other side, y'all know how I am about athletes. I've been saying this for months. If the athletes do something, watch how fast they move. They did something, the conversation completely changed. Now, what we saw is classism. They protested, me and Double R talked about this yesterday. They protested for what, one day? They didn't play for like a couple of games. That's cute. So what they're really going to do is take those games and put them to the back end of the schedule so you really didn't miss any money. But at the end of the day, when you think about athletes, the likelihood of an athlete, especially a successful one, getting stopped and undergoing something like this is not nearly as high as the average Joe who's minding his business going to work. But yet the average Joe will take off from work to go protest in the streets because he's scared of the fact that it legitimately could be him tomorrow. For athletes, that's not their reality. The likelihood of you getting stopped and you going through something like this is not very high. So yeah, you'll take a day and don't. It happens, but the likelihood of a well-known athlete going through getting shot in the back 7 times while he's trying to go to his car versus the average Joe being put in that situation is not as high. So the mindset, and I don't say that to be mean. It's just a reality now. We're really dealing with classism in the Black community. The ideology that because I'm in a certain class, this stuff cannot happen to me or is not likely enough to happen to me. So my investment in it is not going to be as high as the average Joe. We're just kind of seeing it play out. It's cute that you did it for a day. I get it. I appreciate the gesture. But we get gestures from other people. You know.
Well, I'm confused about how it's a gesture, because I just didn't read it that way at all. Like the playoff games being canceled. Players completely walking out and literally deciding that they're not going to play an entire game. And team after team after team after team. I don't think that that's a small thing at all. I think that it's going to make the entire league have to decide what they're going to do. And I think as of this morning, they said 100 employees are joining the protest, and they're literally just walking off their jobs, not athletes, but employees. Part of this is that there's well-known athletes, maybe that we could all casually name on 2 hands, but there's far more athletes in that organization that we do not know. They're not necessarily well-known individuals. They're just Black and brown men. And so you wouldn't necessarily know them from Adam. You may know that you're looking at a tall individual, but that doesn't mean that they're all household names at all. Even on any given team, that's just not necessarily the case. I know that Senator Tim Scott that I just talked about, only Black Republican in U.S. Congress, only one, gets stopped, I think he said about once a month, leaving D.C., in the Capitol or within proximity of the United States Capitol. The only one. So there's only one Black face to memorize, and Capitol Police still regularly stop him. I don't think that we're as, if you knew nobody else and that's your job, you would think that he'd be somebody that you'd know. Okay, not that Black man. Not true. And he gets questioned all the time about who he is. All the time. So I think that there's a little bit more. I think they're much more impacted than that. And I love that the employees have walked out to join that protest as well. But I think game after game, I think that's a pretty big deal. And I think it's a great show, especially now that it's August. We were having these conversations in February and March. I just think that's awesome. I just think it's awesome. But
I feel like when I think about the average Joe, I think like my friends, a lot of the people in my circle took off from work to go to the Capitol this weekend. For a lot of them taking off work means eating and not eating. For the average Joe, it really boils down to eating versus not eating, because if I take off 4 or 5 days to go protest, that's 4 or 5 days out of my paycheck, especially if you have a family, that I'm going to need to feed my family. When I looked at the thing about, particularly I think it was the NBA, they set out a couple of games, but I think they were in semifinals or something like that. I don't follow sport, but it resumed the next day. So my thought process was okay, well, and of course we can't count their coinage, but I guess to me, it just makes a difference literally when you leave your job and your being gone for 4 days really is the life or death of your family, but you believe in the cause that much that you're willing to do that versus I'm skipping a game, but we're resuming it tomorrow. So we'll just add that game to the end of the schedule. We're resuming it tomorrow. So I'm touched, but I'm not as touched as the average Joe. I guess that's how I look at it, because it's really a sacrifice for the average Joe who is legitimately scared that this could literally be me tomorrow. Literally, this could literally be, I don't have any clout. I can't pay lawyers. You know, if I do get shot 7 times in the back, I have to hope that social media will rally with me, that people will want to take on my fight, versus if that were to happen to an athlete, especially a well-known athlete, the world is going to go ham. There's like, case in point, that would have happened like a Shaquille O'Neal. The world is going to go ham. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you shot Shaquille O'Neal 7 times in the back. We're going ham. Like, I don't know. I just think about it that way. It's just, it makes a difference.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but it's just the wrong comparison to make, because the question is not, well, who's making more sacrifices? Like, that's not a contest that you want to win. The question is just, is everybody doing something? Like, who's not doing anything? Like, I think that's how you need to look at it. And I can't speak for the Bucks, which I know was the reference that you were making, but like the Clippers voted to sit out the rest of the season, and so did the Lakers. So both, they're sitting out the rest of the season, so not just one game. It's going to be, I think, much more impactful to the bottom lines of the big institutions and the big corporations and some of the wealthy people who are in the White House, who we talk about their pockets all the time because a lot of their investments have to be publicly disclosed. It's going to be economically impactful. It's going to be a big deal. But we don't need to compare it to, okay, well, they're wealthy. I mean, that's what Jared Kushner essentially said, is that, well, at least they're rich and so they can afford to protest. It's all. You have to be really careful about that kind of rhetoric, because what they're trying to do is to minimize civil disobedience and say, oh, well, you wealthy person, like, you care, big deal. It's like, well, do we want wealthy people to not give an F and to flip their middle fingers up at us? Or do we want them to do something and say, well, I'm not going to dribble this basketball and shut up like I've been told to do because I care? I think that's the way that we should, approach looking at the situation. But
well, I mean, I don't rephrase it. I don't want to. Yeah,
no, I mean, I was just gonna say, even if it was one game, I feel like it's not really. It's about the money, but I also think it's about starting a conversation, because on the grand scale that the NBA is on, even the soccer league, those players sat out some games too. It forces the people who use sports as an escape to now start talking about social issues. And I was also watching First Take with Stephen A. Smith, and he was telling a story about when he was pulled over, had his daughter in the back. He says he always lets all 4 windows down. There were 2 cops. The first cop that came was giving him a hard time, just being really, really aggressive. And then another cop came behind him, recognized him, and he just kind of like whispered in the initial cop's ear. He was like, yo, kind of fall back, because that's Stephen A. You know what I'm saying? So Stephen A., I think he's recognizable to me, but like,
yeah, I don't care who you are. There's I can think of very few Black celebrities who said that they haven't been like not recognized at some point by somebody.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about law enforcement, because they see so many faces a day. But I was talking to an African-American officer. I'm a part of a group called 2020. There are lots of law enforcement officers there. So I talked to a lot of Black people who are either currently or formerly in law enforcement. This officer said, specifically, like, look, when you're off duty and you're driving, as black men and women in law enforcement, what's the first thing you tell the officer when you're pulled over? What's the first thing you say before he can even ask you for your ID? You tell him you're an officer. And the reason for that is so you're not treated the way other Black people, the way you would otherwise be treated. So it's not like a secret. It's just it's very much the case. My mom was like a bailiff, which is, you work for the judge technically. The first thing she said every time she'd been pulled over when I was a child was, I'm a bailiff. I work for the judge. And it completely changes the interaction that you have with that officer, because all of a sudden you're someone, A, who they may see again, but B, someone that they feel somehow like they can trust. Otherwise, they would not be able to feel that they could trust you. And it would be just a totally different posture. So I don't think anyone's really exempt from that. And if you've ever dressed down when you interact with law enforcement versus not, I think you'll notice that. And I think as a Black person moving through this country, if you have never like dressed down and gone somewhere and seen how you're treated versus when you're not, when you're dressed maybe with a polo or if you've never observed that, you're not paying any attention to your surroundings. I don't really even care what state you live in. It's really clear.
I definitely am treated different versus when I have on like slacks and a button down shirt and some nice shoes, to when I have on like a black hoodie, some shorts and some slides. I definitely am. I definitely see it.
So I really don't even know.
Like,
go ahead, Ricardo. You don't own any sweatpants and slides? Is that what you're going to say?
It's honestly the weirdest thing. Like, I can be, like, yesterday I was at where did I go? I went someplace. That was god awful. Like, I've been doing that a lot lately. Ashy feet, like, no hair stuff, like, just winging it. And I forgot who I was talking to. I was someplace, and the guy was like, well, yes, sir. And I'm like, You said, sir, I look like trash. Like, I was like, wow, that's weird.
You should put on a hoodie and go
But then
for it.
No. That's not, well, I wouldn't do it because that's not my, like, I own one hoodie and I don't really wear the hood. Like, it just, I don't like it. It's like hats. I don't really wear hats, but I have one hat that I wear. I was in Walmart. I wore a hat in Walmart because I just looked that bad. But hats, hoodies, I'm not accustomed to putting stuff on my head. So it's not something you're going to really see me wear. So that's my thing. But I don't, let me rephrase some things that I said. I don't want to say that I'm comparing. I'm trying to find a common ground because like I said, I always think about the old days. And it just seemed like in the old days, it didn't matter where you fell. When the cry was made in the Black community, everybody answered. And I don't know, I just feel like there's such levels to us now that it's like people just don't respond the same. It's like, okay, and I can say that because it's like when I think about protest, that's not something I want to do. Now, if we're talking about going to sit at the State House or maybe running for office, that's something I would be more inclined to do. Maybe help out with a campaign. That's something I'm more inclined to do. But to go into the streets and protest, that's not really my thing. It's just not my thing. So I don't know. I'm trying to run dead runs of, how can we fix this? Like, what needs to be done? And I just keep running back into, there's so many things that happens in our community amongst us that we don't deal with. So to try to say that we want everybody else to rally with us when we don't have conversations as pertains to us, I think it is becoming a bigger issue. Like, there's so many things we just don't address in the Black community. There's so many conversations we just won't have that get invited in. It's just, I mean,
break that, let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay, so, I have a lot of LGBT friends, and we have the conversation all the time, and we see it. They're like, oh, well, Black trans lives matter, or Black gay lives matter. And the fact that it has to be a separate conversation is mind-boggling to me. Like, it's like, but we're all African Americans. We should all kind of be having the same fight. But it's completely different fights. That's one. The dichotomy of the Black family. The fact that we're, still not having conversations about the kids, single mothers, and the lack of fathers, and that whole, the way that plays out. We don't have conversations about that. What happens to the kids in those kind of situations? We don't have conversations about that. Education, as it pertains to where you live, the areas you live in, how that affects the kids and their level of education. We don't want to talk about that. There's so many facets of conversations we just won't have. To try to invite other people to the table and say, hey, treat us better, when we have conversations that we need to have that will help us treat each other better, it's just, I don't know. I just.
So that's a hard, I want to push back on that because, first of all, change happens one block at a time. So if you ever see a legislative session or a bill that has got 50 different areas it's trying to address, it's going to be effective at maybe 0 of them, maybe 1. That's just not how change works. I mean, you really have to focus on one thing at a time if you want to get something done. So I think that there's a lot to be said for all the issues that you've talked about, but when we're talking about our relationship with police, this is not a new issue. This is not like, oh, white Americans are just now understanding that, hey, maybe the police treat different people differently. So this is not new. This is something that can be fixed, needs to be fixed. This is a clear structural issue that can be changed with policy, that can be changed with practice, that doesn't have as many nuances, to be totally honest, as a long history, but not as many nuances as some of the other things that you're talking about. Some of the other things that you're talking about that affect our community have a lot to do with with interpersonal relationships, with generational differences. Some of them have economic facets. There's a lot more to it, a lot more pieces of the puzzle to fix than this. This is a simple piece. And some of the frustration about that makes people just take to the streets is because it shouldn't be this hard. It should be easy. This is low-hanging fruit. And you cannot let people off the hook for brutalizing us because, well, we could be slightly better. It's no excuse to allow different people that have different procedures for Black officers to know and admit that they have to tell an officer that they're an officer before they get treated badly, and when they're the ones enforcing the law. So they know it's not even a secret that they treat people differently. That can be changed and that can be fixed. And it's not good enough to say, well, that might as well continue because there's all these other problems. I mean, that's not an answer or an excuse.
Well, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when it comes to police brutality, like, I know you're saying it's low-hanging fruit, but then there's so many other facets you got to fight, especially legally, because it really revolves around the immunity around police that we have been discussing for a whole, I don't know. I don't want to say years. I think now we're really getting into it. But that's a whole fight we got to have, because then the issue becomes, the pushback becomes, okay, well, if we, absolve them of all their immunity, how are they supposed to effectively do their job? But they always have to worry about, if I use this level of force, blah, 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 blah.
That is the fight, though. That is the fight. Like, it is about immunity. It is about accountability. So that's one umbrella, like, in and of itself. It's the lowest hanging fruit out of all the other things we could be talking about. I think that the higher question is about, like, gun control. And, like, well, if there's never any guns on the streets, then there's no reason for an officer to think you have a gun. Gun control is Second Amendment, Constitution. That's a much bigger question. The sole question about officer immunity and accountability, whether it's body cams or whether it's a civil recourse after the fact, that's one lane that we could definitely, and I think most people agree. Certainly that was part of the bill that Justin Amash tried did pen, said that we need to have recourse. We need to have police accountability. Doesn't change anything except for the fact that, like, if you're wronged as a citizen, you have somewhere to go, something to do. Doesn't mean that you're going to have perfect interactions with police. It just means that there may be something you can do about it after the fact. That's still the fight. That's still on the table. That hasn't gone away. That's still important. And there's lots of different ways that you can contribute to that fight. If you want to run for office, that's awesome. If you want to run for one of the positions that impact police brutality or police interactions the most, like you want to be a sheriff, or you want to be a DA, or you want to be that's a really impactful position to get behind if you're going to run for something. But that is essentially it. That's the fight that we have to fight right now.
The question. So what makes this immunity fight so hard? Because it seems to be something we just can't. I don't know. I feel like we chip away at it, and when I say chip, I mean, like, when you hit it and you're constantly hitting and a piece of it falls off, when you've been hitting it 20 times. Like, what is the issue with this immunity thing? I guess that's the underlying
Supreme Court precedent, Graham versus Connor most recently, that discusses what makes an officer constitutionally allowed to use deadly force or reasonable force in a situation, which means that the question about, when we use the word reasonable and we're talking about court, I think most of us seem to think, well, what would I do? Was that reasonable to me? The Supreme Court essentially outlined that is not what reasonable means when it comes to police and civilians. They decided that the jobs of our officers were so hard and were so complex and so nuanced that it is not fair, or even it should not be constitutionally required that a reasonable layman like you or I would act that way. The only thing that's necessary is that someone in the exact same situation who's an officer would act that way. So it's a completely different standard of what is reasonable in the eyes of the law that the Constitution allowed. And for an example of this, there was a case in I think North Georgia, like 3 or 4 years ago, where an officer was pursuing a subject on foot. The guy ran behind somebody's house. He ran behind the house through their backyard, and the officer noticed that in the backyard there was a whole family, dogs, kids, like they're having some sort of backyard party. He had to tell everybody to get down on the ground, put their bellies on the floor while he pursued this suspect. During this time, he's looking for the suspect. It's night. The dog moves, right? Because the dog can't speak English. So the dog moves, startles the officer, and the officer lets a round go. That round hits the little boy in his arm, okay? The officer's not charged with anything. He's not charged. He's not found guilty of any crimes. The boy survives, but he's got all this therapy and stuff to go through. And in the exact same situation, right, there was an officer who was startled by something else. I can't remember if it was a dog or if it was like a household appliance. Same thing happened in a different jurisdiction. And because it was not identical, because it was not a dog, they could not use that precedent to say, well, okay, that was reasonable or unreasonable. They couldn't use that. So the law is essentially so loose that the same thing has to happen twice in the universe before it's considered unreasonable for an officer to behave that way. And circumstances just aren't out that way. So the only way around this is for states to have different policies in their state. And there may still be a legal battle, further down the line, but states can have their own policies about what's legal and what's not. And obviously individual police departments can write their own policies. They're still not going to be subject, around the law, but they can have their own policies about what they do and don't do. So the battle is hard because it's a local battle, really. The Supreme Court amendments are not, those are like Hail Marys. Those are not easy to come by. So the real change can happen at the state level or at the local level. And that's why it feels like we're, playing whack-a-mole, is because in California, things could get better. In Oregon, they could get worse. In Washington, they could get better. In Florida, they could get worse. It's a local thing. Justice is local. So that's why it feels that way, and why there's so much work to do. Unless there becomes some grand sweeping policy, which I think would be that Supreme Court change, this is gonna have to go one city at a time, one county at a time. And honestly, Ricardo, that's really what makes it so difficult, is because where you live your life, maybe you understand where police are and where they aren't. I know where in town I can go where I'm gonna see a lot of police cars and where I'm not. When you travel different states do things differently. So like, I've never been able to travel through Alabama without getting pulled over. And I've learned that there's certain places in Alabama where police are very present and just want to, and will engage you, period, will detain you, period, just to figure out what you're doing. But the fact that it's so different everywhere we go, you may have a completely different interaction with police just by traveling, because people don't stay very still. And because the rules are different there, you could very quickly feel caught off guard by that. Like, what is going on? Why is this happening? So it causes a lot of problems, actually, I think, when it comes to like how well people understand how to deal with police, when every county could be so different.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that complex. I didn't realize it was such
like vomit about it, but there's so much to it. Like, there really is more than I.
But you would know, because you fight those battles more than we do, so you would know. Like that I didn't realize it was such a state-to-state distinction. I think it was a federal thing dealing with immunity. So that
would be great.
That gets kind of dangerous.
Make it easier, but no.
It's kind of dangerous, because every state is different in their interactions. So that really can get dangerous.
Yeah. So in some states, like, you're required to show your ID, like the ID thing. That's always such a big thing. I don't want to show my ID. I'm not driving. Some states you don't have to show your ID. Some you do. Some counties, if you're the passenger, then you don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to identify yourself verbally. In some counties, yes, you do. You sure as hell do, or you're breaking the law. So it's, in some states you don't have to sign the ticket. You could just refuse to sign it. In Georgia, you have to sign it. I believe you can be arrested if you don't sign your ticket. So the fact that it is different everywhere, it's very, very, very challenging to stay on the right side of the law, and challenging not to get frustrated with an officer who you should not be frustrated around. Yeah. If you want to move to Kyle Rittenhouse, though, I think this is important, because we were getting on this before we hopped on this, like, this segue about why the police issues are so big. But this is not a police shooting, and the narrative that we talked about with like the RNC Convention, and sort of painting the picture of America as not only this great place, but as like these victim narratives. I think we talked about the couple that was holding the shotguns outside with the protests and stuff like that, and the pictures that Trump can paint. I think this all ties into Kyle Rittenhouse, because this is a teenager, a Lake County teenager, if you're not familiar with the story. He has been charged with first-degree intentional murder. He shot to kill 3 individuals shortly before midnight outside of the Civic Center Park. So this was one of the protests that was going on, using an AR-15 style, like, type of a rifle. One of the people he shot was 26 years old. Two were 26 years old. One was 36 years old. Apparently, there were reports that he walked right past officers and with his firearm, and said that he killed people, and he wasn't arrested until later that day. This is a teenager.
Oh, that's why that.
Yeah. He described himself as like a militia. So Slate wrote about him and said that, this is a teenager who lives in a world in which police and citizens are in danger of protesters, and have far more danger to deal with than, Black or brown men, and where you're a warrior if you're carrying a gun, and you are responsible for keeping your country safe. It's a really, with slurs aside, it really is kind of like a cowboys versus Indians mentality that I feel like is being preached in this situation. The police didn't release all the names in terms of folks who were involved, but that's essentially the story that's happened. The governor did speak out about that specific incident, but it kind of calls to question. Biden said that, a lot of this does go back to Trump. It's like you say, Ricardo, when you're talking about the top. Trump has been very vocal about rooting for more aggressive tactics against protesters. He's, called governors to get tough, to send in troops, telling you, I'll send in backup. You need to shut this down. No protest, no traffic jams, no inconveniences caused by this unrest, and telling people to just, that has an influence on people. That impacts people. That leads them to feel like they need to take up arms. against other citizens who are peacefully protesting.
And also, there is a picture of him. He was front row at a Trump rally in like 2016. He was right there. So he was just following the narrative of his leader, or his what you call him, demigod.
The demigod.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this we have to continuously unpack. So one more thing before we head out, I came across the article that was really disturbing to me, and I'm just like, I just want to punch people in the face when some things happen, because I'm just like, how do these things happen? So apparently, after repeated warnings from the U.S. Department of Labor, the City of Atlanta's Workforce Development Agency has lost a $4 million federal grant to provide technical training to unemployed, underemployed, low-skilled, and low-wage workers so they can get better jobs, according to documents obtained by Channel 2 Action News. Workforce Atlanta is supposed to provide job training and support to the city's at-risk youth, laid-off workers, disabled, and chronically unemployed residents. I'm just trying to understand.
They lost the grant? Did they do something wrong? Like they miss it?
So in 2019, the federal agency reviewed records over a roughly 18-month time period ending on December 31st, 2018, and found that WorkSource had achieved less than 1% of the goals required for a grant called Tech Hire. For example, WorkSource was supposed to have placed 225 people in new jobs during that time period, and had only found work for one person. Another unmet goal was WorkSource to train 450 people, but it had trained only 9, according to findings. The city also spent $333,000 on unallowable expenses under the grant agreement by using it to help fund salaries and benefits of WorkSource's top staff, according to the Labor Department. Really? Really? Wow. This is what we're doing. I threw that in for those individuals that for Sunday's episode we have Linda Chapman, who is I call her a grant writing demigod, because she writes them, she approves them, all that good stuff. This is the other side of when you receive a grant and you tell the government, this is the rubric, these are the outcomes. They do not play. Atlanta just off a $4 million grant, because as you can see, the rubric they created, they did not meet. How in the world are you supposed to train 225 and you trained 1? But I'm sure you spent the grant money, or at least a fraction of the grant money, on the people who are supposed to be doing the job. Like, I'm trying to understand.
That's crazy. So they apparently had 6 different directors in 6 years.
What was the question, Kyle?
I'm just trying to figure out where the money went. Like,
they said it went on benefits, salary. So I guess what they were doing was saying, hey, we're employing these 15 people to do the job. This is how much they get paid. These are the benefits. Those people were clearly not being held accountable by whoever's supposed to be holding them accountable. So this money just kind of goes, because you're getting a paycheck or 2 every month. So this money is continuing to be depleted, and nobody's being accountable. And then the government swoops in and goes, okay, we gave y'all $4 million. Where do we stand? Y'all said give y'all, we'll say 10 months. We all said give y'all 10 months. This is what y'all were going to do in those 10 months. All right, we're here. It's been 10 months. What have you been doing? Oh, you haven't been doing that, but all the money's been spent on the people that were supposed to be getting the job done. How does that happen?
Yeah, and it looks like that was unallowable. Like, they weren't allowed to use that money, I guess, for some of those salaries and benefits. Like there was like that. What either wasn't a part of it. Or, I worked before for nonprofits, and I've done a lot of my own grant writing, and had to kind of look through these proposals and come up with them. And there's usually very strict guidelines for one before you can even apply, but also between what you can do with that money. And sometimes they say, like, look, you can't be decorating offices, you can't be, reserving class spaces, you can't be buying supplies, you can't do any of that. Like, if you're going to do this, it has to be for this specific purpose over this time frame. And a lot of times the grants are truncated, so they will give you X amount for like 3 months, and then you'll have to file a grant report talking about the outcomes that you delivered at this point before they'll even give you the second piece, the third piece, or the fourth piece. Clearly different, foundations, especially federal or state money, public money is distributed differently. But a lot of private foundations, for this exact reason, are like, they want regular reports about that money. if they give it to you all up front, it's very rare. It's usually because like you're just a very well-established organization. You've proven all, you know, your ability to handle it. But that's crazy.
Well, it went a step farther. So the city partnered with the Department of Labor to address their concerns. A spokesman for Keisha Lansbottom said in a statement, however, we did not receive an extension and will not move forward, and will move forward to close out the grant. So apparently they're going to continue to look into it. But apparently in 2013, the city's auditor recommended that WorkSource be shut down. So they made that recommendation in 2013. Last year, the Atlanta City Council asked for an audit after WorkSource lost a $1.3 million jobs training grant by failing to spend the money before the deadline. So
I recall that. Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's ludicrous. You get money on this hand, but you can't execute the outcomes that you said to get the grant. And on the other hand, you get the grant and you can't even spend the money before the grant expires. Like what? Who is in charge of WorkSource?
So for reputation's sake, one is definitely better, right? Like if you know that you're running this program, you're supposed to have like 50 people a week, and you're only seeing 1 or 2 come through the door. You better fail to spend all that money because they're going to want it back. And you know, at the end of the day, they gave you the money to execute a certain task. So it better, if you underdeliver, you also got to underspend. It just sucks when that is not the case, for sure. I would love to know why it failed in more detail, but I saw that there was like no comment or something, and there's never any comment, you know, from the people running it.
Well, the AJC said they reviewed a 54-page city audit of the program, which found that WorkSource disregarded government guidelines and mismanaged programs. The audit released in March specifically mentioned the risk of losing the $4 million federal tech hire grant. So they said that leadership instability may have created challenges in meeting performance targets. The auditor said WorkSource Atlanta has had 6 executive directors over the past 6 years,
right,
and the agency's oversight board has not met regularly since February 2018. I mean, I'm disgusted, but again, the bigger issue is what happens to the people. Like, you were supposed to retrain these people to kind of better prepare them to go into the workforce and be better.
Yeah, that's my biggest question about this, because what you mentioned was talking about their failure to train people. And to me, it just sounds like, was there no interest? Was there no demand? Because it's different to fail at like job placement, right? Like if some of the programs I work for were job placement programs, and that's a challenge because you can't guarantee job placement. You can only say we should be able to do this. Like, unless you've got employers in your back pocket, which you don't, you may have relationships, but you can't necessarily guarantee those slots. So, but training is different, because training you can do. You can train somebody. Training doesn't mean like, oh, this person is an expert. Training doesn't mean, oh, this person's going to get hired. But for you to not train those people, it's like somebody wasn't working, or there was just no interest in this program. Like, that kind of makes me feel like, was it an interest issue, or were people literally not working? Because how could training not be happening?
Well, I mean, even if it's an interest issue, if you have a grant and you have, well, we don't know the specifications of the grant, but I'm sure you could build in some kind of incentive to get people to come through the door. Like, you just can't.
Either that, or you're going to start knocking on doors and saying, hey, there's somebody there training. Somebody.
I mean, it's my concern is, you know, the stuff that we really should be focused on as far as leadership goes to better the city. This stuff just seems to be falling through the cracks. Like, how do you not train people? Like, you can always find some incentive. There's always an incentive. You can lure people in with something. The mere fact that, you know, the people were getting paid the salary to get this job done, and it was not done. And it's not like it was something that we don't need. It was something that we vitally need. People need new skill sets. They need, you know, to be able to get better jobs. Like, I don't understand how we let a $4 million grant just fall by the wayside. Like, I don't get it. But I digress. Actually, I thought of some good news. In good news, I just thought about some good news. Great music just came out. Lettucey, I call it Let It Crawl. Lettucey just came out with an album that came out today. I adore Lettucey, R&B. Somebody else. Jasmine Sullivan just dropped a single last night at 12 o'clock. I can't say that I loved it. I was a little underwhelmed, but I love Jasmine, so we'll see what the album looks like.
Same here. JoJo's album, though. JoJo's album came out. It's good. It came out today. Who else? Molly Music had an album this past week. Especially if you like gospel music. Yeah, it just came out with an album last week, The Book of Molly. I love Molly Music to death. He'll be on Sunday's Best. I think the next episode is Sunday's Best.
Man, Sunday's Best is over. He was
He's
Sunday's
going to
Best
be on the
Sunday
next
Pass.
season. I think he's either going to be on the next season or he's going to be on, because Erica just announced it this morning, Erica Campbell. So maybe he'll be on the next season. I don't know if he'll be a judge or if he'll be doing a guest appearance, but she confirmed it.
Do they change their judges like every season, like on The Voice?
They probably got to do something this season because I'm not gonna lie. I love Sunday's Best, but the judges this season, they were way off. Like
really,
it's Kirk. It's
Explain.
Kirk, Corin, and then the Jonathan guy, right?
Jonathan McReynolds.
Well, no,
Yeah, I like all three of them.
He's not the judge.
What was your judge issue, Ricardo?
Well, for one, I mean,
She can't wait.
you know,
I'm just curious.
I know, right? Like she actually walked. Okay, so the judges are Kelly Price, Erica Campbell, Jonathan McReynolds. I adore Jonathan McReynolds. I love the way he sings. I love the advice he gives, especially to the young people. I think he's an amazing judge. I didn't expect that. Erica Campbell, yeah, I like Erica, but as a judge, yeah. And you got to look at, now I'm a diehard Mary Mary fan, but there is a definitive difference between Tina and Erica.
Oh, I know.
Complete difference.
I know.
And they in a group, they're completely different. Erica, I don't know. She just seems she's very nice. And she'll say little things, but it's not anything bad. And then there's Kelly Price. Adore Kelly Price. Always love Kelly Price as an R&B singer. I don't know about a gospel judge. Here's the reality, and I can say this because I've seen it. Kelly Price, in R&B music, Kelly Price her voice is golden. You don't find somebody that can sing like Kelly Price in the R&B arena very often. In the gospel arena, Kelly Price's voice comes a dime a dozen. You can go to any storefront and find somebody that can sing circles around Kelly Price. That's just the reality of it. So to have her be a judge on a gospel singing competition, I've seen Kelly Price on stage.
That's so strange to me because, well, for one thing, a lot of these judges on these shows are not like, not necessarily just gospel shows, but even like The Voice and like American Idol, they've had some judges that I'm like, they won't even sing. Like, half of them do not, Katy Perry, hello, like, but on a lot of these shows, so I don't expect that from these judges necessarily, but I'm very surprised that you feel like, because she can sing, and also you don't think people can sing circles around Jonathan McReynolds? Like, he has a unique voice, but you don't think people can technically sing circles around Jonathan McReynolds?
No. Not in the what makes Jonathan unique, and we're talking about specifically gospel music. What makes Jonathan McReynolds' voice special in gospel is you don't hear guys sing in the space that Jonathan sings in.
You're
Usually
saying
either singing in falsetto.
You're not saying she's not talented, you're saying she's not special.
In gospel music, no. Like, I've watched Kelly Price because I went to the Black Music Honors. Kelly Price was on stage with Jacqueline Carr and Leandria Johnson. And, baby, you could tell the difference. Like, first of all, it's hard for anybody to sing on stage. Erica Campbell can't go toe-to-toe with Leandria Johnson. Blackfoot singing. Now, Tina can. Tina can.
Erica Campbell can't go toe-to-toe with Kelly Price.
That's true, too. That's very true. But Kelly was on stage with Leandria and Jacqueline, and I'm sorry, Kelly couldn't hold her weight. She's a great singer, but we're talking about gospel music. She can't hold her weight. She couldn't hold her weight that day. So, and I agree with you. Like, there's the different type of judging, and I'm using air quotes because you really can't judge gospel music. You can only judge technique and stuff of that magnitude, which you got to be careful with that because gospel singers have a different singing style. But this particular season on Sunday's Best,
they're not.
That's yeah. This particular season on Sunday's Best, I felt like they had an opportunity that they missed because there was a non-African American woman by the name of Ashley who sang. I mean, we were all like, she's gonna win. Like, she can sing that well, and they eliminated her. She didn't even get to the top 3, and I'm just like, what were you listening to?
But you heard the performance she was eliminated on, though.
Yeah, but none of them did that. She actually did good that week. Honestly, and I'm saying this because if you know the history of Sunday's Best, the girl that got to the top 2, Jada is Alexis Spice's little sister. Alexis got to the top 2 the season that Joshua Rogers won. I can say this is my opinion. I only feel like that's why she got to the top 2. How in the God's name can you tell me that Jada can hold her weight against Stephanie. Stephanie's a veteran singer. Like, it should have honestly been Jamal, Ashley, and Stephanie should have been your top three. Jamal was amazing. Now, I didn't agree with them about Jamal with the deer in headlights when he sings. You can work on that. I mean, you can work on that. I do that when I sing.
You can work on performance. The only thing I'll say about this, the only thing I will say about this is why sometimes, and like I was watching this past season of Sunday's Best, but I haven't watched it in years, and I don't watch a lot of these shows just because of that exact reason, is that there's too many decisions that I disagree with. And a lot of times it has nothing to do, because most of the time it has nothing to do with their actual talent. There could be somebody who, like, you know, can blow the house down. They have one bad day and then they just get rid of them, and I'm like, but how? Because their bad day is like the only time we, you know, so not another time I honestly am too emotional to even watch these shows. I usually just am, because it's too, the decisions are like too, I can't make sense of them. But at least
now when they had
judges were relatively talented compared to other judges on secular shows, because it's just like, I'm like, how are you a judge? How is Gwen Stefani? How is
yeah, I didn't.
People that just kill, the mind. But anyway.
I used to be really heavy into American Idol.
Yeah.
And the last time I watched American Idol was when Mariah Carey was on. But that's cool. But Mariah Carey was sitting next to Nicki Minaj. I'm just trying to figure out why Nicki Minaj is a judge.
That's what Mariah Carey was trying to figure out for the entire.
If it was a rap battle, if it was a rap competition show, then by all means. However, it's singing.
I don't even qualify to do that. I don't think she's qualified to do that.
Yeah, that's a different.
I'm just saying. I'm just
She's not.
saying. I don't think she's qualified to be a rap. I mean, okay, so I will say this: as somebody building a media empire, there are lessons that I have learned. I'm not going to get into those lessons, but I've learned some lessons as it pertains. I can't get up call names. I've learned that there has to be a hybrid of skill and marketability. So a decision that I made previously to do something, it didn't fail, but I made another decision on the back end, and that decision brought me a different result that I was not expecting. So when it comes to judges, and particularly in that scenario that Kyle just used, having Nicki Minaj, especially towards the end of American Idol, they were just trying to get ratings. Having Nicki Minaj was more about marketability and ratings, because at that time Nicki was hot. So having her on there brought new eyes that they probably would not have gotten had they not put a Nicki Minaj in. Doesn't look good talent-wise and judging, but it looked good marketability-wise, bringing in ratings that they needed to try to save the show.
You just never know who's going to be cool and who's not. Like, I've seen Kelly Rowland as a judge on the X Factor, and she's not only is she at least a singer, but she actually gave judgments. Like, she actually gave critiques and like comments. And a lot of the judges are just kind of fluffy. Like, they want somebody to just be like, that was better than last week. And it's like, that's all you have to say. Like, that's all. So a lot of them, like, they're not really judging. It's just kind of there anyway, unfortunately. But I hear what you're saying. Like, I get what you're saying with that. Because, yeah, if it was just
I think, and me and my friends were saying, they had Sunday's Best this season had the opportunity to really go somewhere, because the reality is, even if the top two was Ashley, who again is non-African American, and Stephanie, it shows other ethnicities. I've been told this. I'm a gospel choir director, so I've been told this. I went to a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, and I've been told by non-African American students that they didn't join gospel choir because they felt like gospel music is something only for Black people. They could enjoy it, but to be a part of it, they didn't feel like they could be a part of it because they just feel like it's a cultural thing. I feel like Sunday's Best had the opportunity to break out of that barrier and say, no, we embody every diversity. If you can sing on your voice.
I don't understand why they feel like that. Like, there are white people that do R&B, they do rap, they do everything else. Like, I don't get it.
But gospel carries something that you really can't explain. We can explain it because we say it's the anointing and we kind of know what that means. But to try to explain that to some other ethnicity, what do you want? It's hard to say what the anointing is. Oh, what's the anointing? And then look at you like,
and that's why that's another reason why I didn't mess with Erica Campbell, and I don't appreciate her on that show, and I don't listen to her radio show, is because all that you can say is that, like, somebody has to emote. They have to emote. What she kind of calls anointing is like, oh, your clothes were kind of tight, and that took away from the anointing, and I just couldn't get somebody like, and I just don't get with that like old school judgmental
She said stuff like
nonsense.
that.
That's not the point. That's not the point. But
I mean, they.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'll say this. All right, so again,
but
I'm
wait,
a choir director.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but what about the British singer? Because maybe that's the point that your students were making. Because there was like a black woman there from Britain, wasn't she, from the UK? And she was.
I know you're talking about. I loved her. I was mad when she went on.
Right, but like, so I'm listening to like some of her inflections and what she did with like the music. It was kind of clear that like her accent was there, and like there was just the way that different people in different countries speak. There were certain things that I felt vocally she could not do as well. That doesn't mean that she couldn't do her own thing, which I think is the advice that she got was like, you need to do your own thing because your voice has a unique color and you're just trying to copy and paste these other like the songs as you hear them, and that's not what your voice should really be doing. So it's not that she wasn't talented, but I do think maybe there's something to be said about the fact that like there is a I can't even think of how to put it, but she was a black woman and I don't think she delivered. I think Ashley was better than her. So, you know, for what that matters, maybe it is cultural, but that doesn't mean that it's racial.
Well, I mean, I think, and like I said, I experienced this firsthand when I was at AIU and I had my organization back then called Phase 2, and it was choir. And the president of the college, who was not black, fell in love with the group. And I would never forget the first time they sang Lord, I Draw From You, which is not a hand clapping foot stomper type song. And I remember he was sitting on the front where he turned red. And he really didn't know what to do with himself because he just, you know, this flush of emotions he's not used to feeling, which we call the anointing. He didn't know what to do. And he just, from there on, it didn't matter. He got us to sing for the Braves. Like, I'll never forget that day. But again, when the kids said that to me at Coastal, they were like, we can appreciate it, but we don't feel like it's something that we can do. I felt like Sunday's Best lost an opportunity this season to break out of that mold. Because Ashton, had she won or been in the top 2, it was validated. The woman can sing. She had the anointing. And had she got to the top 2 or won, then it would have opened the door for other minorities to say, you know what, maybe this isn't just a black thing because she looks like me. And I feel that way when I sing gospel music. Maybe I should try it out. I just feel like they lost an opportunity.
They could try it out. I think Ashley's kind of a gem. I think she's kind of one in a million. There may be others, but I think it's rare. It is rare. Because even with contemporary Christian music, there's some huge contemporary Christian artists. Like contemporary Christian, CCM ain't my thing. It's just not my thing per se. Doesn't mean I won't listen to it, but I just prefer gospel, and they're different genres. They're different genres of music.
Well, I would love to actually interview Kirk Franklin, because when Kirk Franklin made that statement last year about the Dove Awards versus the Stellar Awards, it was something that's unwritten that nobody ever wants to speak on. The fact that the Dove Awards is really for non-African Americans and the Stellar Awards for African Americans, and he finally spoke on it. And I was like, wow.
I disagree. I totally disagree, though.
Look at it. I mean, they have black spotlights, but it's like Christian. Even when you look at the genre, when you look at Billboard, there's Christian music and there's gospel music. And if you look at the people that are on those boards,
but that's why I'm saying that. That's why I'm saying that. It's because I do think that there's a difference between the acoustic guitar, right, which is like the contemporary Christian. It's all about that guitar. It's all about the guitar. And gospel music, it's like, I don't care what church I go into. There's a church with no budget that he used to play at. There's a bassist if there's nothing else. There's some bass. There's percussion. We just believe in bass. I really can't listen to music without bass, to be totally fair. So I really do think there are different genres of music, and it doesn't mean that people can't participate. Like Brian Poppin is one of my favorite gospel artists. He's a white man. You know what I mean? Like there's whites, but gospel isn't.
I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that was his issue. I think what they're saying is and we're actually seeing it, and we talk about it all the time. We are way over our time, but it's all good. We see this all the time. Like and my friends talk, because I love gospel music. I love gospel music. And me and my friends talk about this all the time, because one of my friends is a gospel artist. The gospel pool is shrinking. It's not getting bigger. It's shrinking. You know, the fact that Bobby Jones Gospel is no longer on. The fact that BET doesn't even have a gospel show anymore outside of Sunday's Best, when that was the go-to. You know, back in the day, you had Bobby Jones, Celebration of Gospel, Joyful Noise. All of those things are gone. Even when it comes to the Sunday's Best, and we joke about it, it's really real. We were saying that when you look at RuPaul's Drag Race started out with a cash prize of $50,000. In 10 seasons, they have scaled that prize to $100,000. Sunday's Best has had $50,000 as the prize for 10 seasons. And I don't see them even being able to scale that because it's in such a box. Until we recognize, again, that, this is happening and stop letting it happen, especially particularly, this is one of my gripes at BET, Black entertainment television, and we can't preserve gospel music, and that's at the core of Black people's, like, our being. Even from slavery days, that's how we got to where we were going. And that's one of the few jobs you have, and you can't even do it? Come on, people. Come on, BET. You can't even, Sunday's Best, yay. You let Bobby Jones go. Come on, bro.
Right.
Bobby Jones.
I hope you're right. These kids get less religious over time. I hope you're right.
Yeah, but Black folks will always have gospel music. I don't care what comes and what
always,
goes.
Always.
Somebody's gonna preserve gospel music.
But less and less.
Somebody. I'm just, but when you look at the Christian music arena, they still have a pretty nice little place they can go. Like, when you win Sunday's Best, I was actually proud of them for doing the McDonald's tour thing. Because normally when you win, you get that recorded contract, which people complain about, and you get the $50,000. That's pretty much about it. Like, I don't know. We just we're letting things slip through the cracks that should not be slipping through the cracks. Gospel music should be expanding, not getting smaller.
That's fair.
And, I just probably, but
I digress. We don't have time, but that brings a whole other question, but I'll leave it for now. But it's fine. It's fine.
You know what? Next time we're gonna have one show. We're gonna have a ramble show where we just gotta go into stuff we want to go in. We're gonna have a ramble show one time. So Kyle, get your stuff together. Simone, actually, we're gonna do it next Friday. Next Friday on the Leadership Blend, we're gonna have a ramble show, meaning we just pick stuff we want to talk about. We'll do some current events first, but we're gonna talk about stuff we just want to talk about the things that we feel, and it's gonna be an opinion-based show, and we're just gonna have fun. That's what we're going to do next Friday. Everybody in?
Yep.
I'm in.
So that's what we're going to do. And to everybody that's listening, feel free to inbox me some things or post on my wall things you want to talk about, that you would like to hear us talk about, that would just be entertaining for you, or that you really want to get our insight on. So just inbox me, put it on my wall, things, all the people that watch it and listen, things that you would love to hear us talk about or get into that may not be current events, but just topics you would like to hear us get into, because y'all know how we get. So we're going to do that next Friday. We're going to have some fun next Friday on the Leadership Blend. We are way past our time. So anybody got any final thoughts about anything that we talked about today?
No time. No time.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see y'all next Friday. I'm going to call it the Ramble Show next Friday, where we're going to have fun, and we're just going to talk about stuff that we want to talk about. We still can keep you informed. But we're going to have fun and talk about stuff that we want to talk about. So we'll see you next Friday, same time, same place, on the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Wright. All right, hold on. Let me stop this.